Didn't organize my notes. Should have done that while I was playing the song. The Olympics. Okay, I want to get the Olympics out of the way up front. It's because, yeah, they start next week. I really want them to start so they can be done more than anything else. I want the Olympics to happen. I want them to actually have no problems. I don't want anyone to get hurt or sick or anything. I just want them to be over so that Japan as a country could be like, okay, we did it. Let's focus on actually getting everyone vaccinated and getting rid of the coronavirus, please. I got my ticket. I am supposed to get vaccinated in early August. So I'll be very interested to see if that actually happens because there's been, of course, not enough vaccine here. And there was another company, I read about it this morning. I didn't actually write it down. It wasn't part of the news for me today. The Japanese company is going to produce 60 million doses, which could be good because it's being produced domestically. That would solve a lot of problems. But let's get rid of any Olympics news. Wednesday, the day after last week's podcast, it was announced that they were going to cut it from 10,000 to 5,000 spectators. And then by the end of that week, it was decided there were going to be no spectators at the Olympics at all. And so this guy went on TV. And of course, there was a guy who went on TV and he cried. Now, I am not against people crying. I think crying is a natural thing. It has time to play. Of course, this is maybe his whole life. This was the guy in charge of tickets in Japan. And he had to go on TV and apologize to everybody who had bought tickets. Like, I'm sorry, you can't use them. And then he started to cry. Now, I'm sure he was overwhelmed with emotion. His job is on the line. This is now, it's not his fault. But Japanese TV has a lot of crying. And so I've now gotten to the point where I'm not a big fan of people crying on TV because now it happens so often. It's almost like it's expected. So because it's expected, it seems insincere. They really want, so when someone wins a sport, this might be very appropriate to the Olympics. So when you win an event, they want you on TV crying because you're so overjoyed with emotion. The tears just flow. And then when you lose, they want to stick a camera in your face and get the scene of you crying because you're so sad that you were defeated. I'm on board with Naomi Osaka. If I had just lost something, I think the last thing I would want is people sticking cameras in my faces. But in Japan, they really, really, really want to get people on video crying. So yeah, so this poor guy who is in charge of selling the tickets, who just has to go out and tell everyone in the country, like all those tickets you maybe bought. I don't know if they took the money yet, but all those tickets you bought or won lotteries for or entered multiple times, yeah, none of that's going to go. You can't go to the Olympics. And then he cried. I bet that was sincere, but I was just like, oh man, I've seen just too many people crying on TV. This just doesn't feel sincere anymore. This is not Olympic news, but it's related because the Ibaraki Music Festival, and a lot of music festivals have been canceled last year and this year. They were kind of like complaining because you have Tokyo in a state of emergency is going to hold the Olympics. Whereas Ibaraki, the prefecture, is not in a state of emergency. Forget if it's a prefecture or a city. Anyways, the Ibaraki Music Festival is what I'm talking about. They're not in a state of emergency, but they're being told they can't hold their music festival. And because it was canceled, but there's no state of emergency, they're not eligible for any sort of government support or government funds. So normally last year when this same thing happened, so they had the Ibaraki Music Festival, because the government shut it down, it was a state of emergency. They got like 25 million yen, probably to pay off the people who were setting up and the people who work there and organizers and stuff. So they don't go broke. But this time, because there's no state of emergency, they don't get any of those government funds. And they're saying this is unfair because we don't have a state of emergency, but we're not allowed to hold our event. But you have Tokyo is in a state of emergency and it is allowed to hold the Olympics. That's not fair, which I agree with. That's not fair. I think they should both be shut down. I think the Ibaraki Music Festival should be shut down. Music festivals, summer, still coronavirus, terrible idea. Don't do that. The government are they responsible for it? I don't know. Uh, but I'm on board with we should not be having the Olympics. Then there's the Fuji Rock Festival. It's probably the most famous music festival in Japan. It's the guy said this: we have to continue preparation while hoping the situation will improve. Whereas the actual answer to that is no, you don't. Uh, the situation isn't going to improve if you keep having festivals. So we need to get rid of the coronavirus first, then start making preparations for stuff from that point onward. If you continue to make preparations with the intent of holding your festival and then crying that it gets canceled and people didn't make money, I get there's people not making money if they're not making plans and stuff. And I have sympathy for them. But if we had just done all this last year, we'd be okay now. Ironically, it's the greed that is keeping the coronavirus around. It's the cities keep opening, they keep having events, the go to travel, the go to eat, all these campaigns to try to make money. If they'd all just not done any of that and done a proper lockdown, much like New Zealand, we'd be like New Zealand, and they basically can walk around. They don't have to wear masks, and it makes me kind of wish I lived in New Zealand. So there was a lady, and I have a very interesting amount of respect for this lady. She's done a very interesting thing. There was a 53-year-old woman, and she said, I'm opposed to the Olympics. I don't think the Olympics should happen. I'm in agreement with her philosophically speaking. I don't know. And I honestly, I kind of approve of her actions. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have thought of it, first of all. She went to the store and bought a squirt gun. And when the Olympic torch was running by, this is a 77-year-old man. This is maybe the part where I feel sad. This 77-year-old man's running with the Olympic torch. And she has a little squirt gun, and she squirts it at the Olympic flame. And while she's squirting at the Olympic flame, she's saying in a relatively gentle voice, I'm opposed to the Olympics. I'm opposed to the Olympics. The only reason I really stuck on this story more than anything else is the squirt gun was completely ineffective. It was a normal little kid squirt gun. So it was like, psh, psh. The Olympic flame, I don't know how they do it. I assume it's a torch of some sort. I don't know what's fueling it. It's not wood. Like it's got like gas or something. It's probably a gas cylinder in there. You are not going to put out the Olympic torch with a squirt gun. But then of course I wouldn't have wanted her to be more aggressive. I flip-flop on this one badly because she wanted to show she was opposed to the Olympics. She wanted to get some attention. She started squirting her gun at the Olympic flame, but it wasn't going to put out the flame. So was that her ultimate goal? I think maybe it was, and she hadn't really thought this through. Much like most of the criminal enterprises we talk about on Ninja News Japan, the preceding statement of she didn't think it through seems like a pretty common problem. So then I was like, oh, well, how would you put out the Olympic flame? And I was like, well, you need at least a bucket of water and you need to hit it properly. And then I was thinking, oh, that poor 77-year-old man who's, doing his best running with the Olympic flame. There was no good way for this to work out. I kind of thought, put out the Olympic flame in the middle of the run. Be very symbolic. I thought that was kind of a cool idea. The police have decided they are going to seek motives. So she was arrested immediately, which was weird because they say they're seeking motive, but she's actually said, yes, well, clearly she was caught on camera doing it. But yes, I did it and I'm opposed to the Olympics. She was literally saying that out loud as the flame was going past and as she was getting like caught by the police. So I guess that she hasn't been prosecuted and found guilty yet. So seeking a motive just seemed like a weird thing because we know what the motive is. It just hasn't been proven as to whether she was malicious or what kind of punishment's appropriate for it because she said it. Now we get to the post-mortem of this. Uh, they said the liquid did not exhibit offensive smell or tackiness, and therefore it must be just water. And then I immediately thought, that's someone's job. So so this lady gets arrested. I was about to say poor lady, but I mean, she did it. She actually technically deserves to be arrested. I'm not going to throw up too many judgments. So one of the police officers has to pick up the gun, and my immediate thought was like they do in the movies. They get a pen or a pencil and they pick it up by the finger guard. I actually forget what that's called. There's the trigger. It must be trigger guard. Anyways, the bit you put your finger in, and they pick up the gun and they hold it up and like examine it, but they don't want to touch it because they don't want to get fingerprints. Although they don't have to worry about fingerprints because they saw her holding it and they saw her squirting it as well. But then there's like, okay, Tom, it's your turn to smell the liquid. And Tom's like, what? I suppose I start using Japanese names in these jokes, but they don't come fast. It's always Toshi. I guess that's just going to be my default Japanese name for stories now. So all the cops are sitting around. They go, okay, Toshi, we all paid for sushi yesterday. You didn't pay as much as everyone else. So it's your turn to smell the liquid. And he's like, oh man, I smelled the liquid last time when we had the guy throwing semen on the woman in the department store. He's like, yeah, and you enjoyed it. So it's your turn again. So they're all like, hey, Toshi, it's your turn to sniff the liquid. So he has to like gingerly open up the tube. This was one of the ones where you fill up the bottle and you stick it on the squirt gun. You have to maybe probably pump it a few times to actually shoot. It was one-handed. It wasn't one of the big ones. So Toshi has to like gingerly take that off. Probably smells the outside first to get a sense of what he's in for. Is this going to like ruin my day? And then he smells it and goes, it doesn't smell too bad. They're like, okay, well, Toshi, you got to touch it. And Toshi's like, what? I smelled it. It doesn't, there's no smell. So it's not urine. It's not any of the other liquids that we worry about. It's certainly not acid because it actually sprayed on people and there was no problem. Like, Toshi, you got to touch it. Come on, man. Toshi, you got to touch the liquid to see if it's tacky. Because if it's not, then it's probably water. And then he's like, well, I don't want to touch it. Give me some gloves. I'm like, dude, we just ran out of gloves. I'm sorry. You're going to have to touch it with your fingers. To really get a sense of how tacky it is, Toshi, you're going to have to touch it with your fingers, Toshi. So touch it with your fingers, Toshi. Toshi's like, he's really succumbing to peer pressure at this point. He goes, okay. So he puts his finger in and he rubs it around and everyone goes, Toshi touched it. We have people for that and machines. So then Toshi's now become like a pariah of the police department. I suppose the next step would actually be them going, Toshi, you got to taste it now. You got to drink it, Toshi. Come on, drink it, Toshi. Toshi, you got to drink it. Drink the drink, Toshi. You got to find out if it's liquid. You know it's safe. You know it's just water. Just drink the water. And then if you actually broke down and drank it, they'd all be like, Toshi drank it. It's disgusting. One man play, Toshi of the police department. I think Toshi's going to be a recurring character. I think whenever I need to talk about police jobs and stuff, it might just be Toshi the cop. I'm going to have to come up with a list of some names. But Toshi the cop is now a standard. This is the video of the lady squirting the gun. So let's actually just start from the beginning. I'll get it back there. So you can see she's raising the gun. You can see it's like, it's not pump action. It's got the tube, though, where she's put the water in. And there's the 77-year-old man. And she takes aim right at him. This is a terrifying moment. This poor guy, he's jogging along. He's got the beautiful bright flame above him. This guy over here has noticed. He's like, something's up with that lady. She's got a gun, but he doesn't tackle her to the ground because it's not really a gun. And then she starts squirting. She gets like 8 pumps out. The older man, our 77-year-old guy jogging with it, he's noticed he's been sprayed and not in a nice way. Because you could be like spraying to cool him off. Japan's a very hot country. He's looking at her like, what are you doing? So what she said was Tokyo Olympic Hantai. Tokyo Olympic Hantai. And that's just basically Tokyo Olympics opposed or opposite. She is opposed to the Tokyo Olympics if you're going to translate it perfectly into English. So let's get a little sound of that. Not even aggressively. She's just like, I'm opposed to the Olympics. And then this, I don't know if it's staff or police officers, is like, what are you doing? And then the cop immediately previously was blocking trying to block the stream, but way too late. Right. So what are you doing? 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 Right. So what are you do is what she says. And then these must be cops. He's got a little microphone. I don't know. Maybe they're just staff, but just standing in front, they kind of grabbed her wrist. She's not resisting or anything. Everyone runs by. That's it. Anyways, so that lady was opposed to the Olympics. Her grand scheme to bring attention to it was to squirt the Olympic torch with a squirt gun. A very cheap one, I might add. I bought squirt guns way better than that one. I'm just putting that out there. If you're going to go and do it, she should have got one of those pump action ones that, delivers a certain amount of stream. I would feel sorry for the old man. I bet a little spray here and there actually felt pretty good. He did have a very confused look on his face. But completely ineffective. I am now trying to follow up and see what the punishment is for this, because it could be assault. I think she was arrested. It was a classic. Disruption of business. Completely meaningless. I guess the business was running the Olympics and she disrupted that. So they can, this is one of the ones I actually is interesting, because they can make that stick on anything. The disruption of business, anything you do could technically be disrupting business. So I guess that's kind of where that came from. That is all the Olympic news, and I think all the Corona news as well. I think I've done it. I think I've broken the code of just not talking about coronavirus. Actually, I got one story, but this is good. It's not really about coronavirus. There was a man in Hokkaido in his 80s, and he's a healthcare worker. So he was up to get vaccinated really early on. First of all, he's quite old. They did the older people first, and he's a healthcare worker. I assume I don't actually know if that means he was a doctor or whatnot. Got a lot of old doctors in Japan, so he could be. No, he can't be. Maybe he is. I don't know. They didn't say. They said healthcare worker. I guess if he's a doctor, this story's more embarrassing. He worked outside of his town. So he went and got vaccinated as a healthcare worker. And then he went back to his town and he got his ticket to be inoculated again. And he got it again. So he ended up with 4 doses of inoculation. And he said, because he thought it would be more effective. So the more vaccine you get, the more effective that will be. He said it would, my body will produce more antibodies. I don't think that's how it works. And I'm not a healthcare worker. And this is where the sort of the big concern was, the fact that he's supposed to be a healthcare worker, but doesn't know, like, you just do more isn't more effective. This is one of the problems with people in aspirin. Like, this is like the most base level. If you take aspirin and then 10 minutes later take 2 more aspirin, and then 10 minutes later you're not actually gaining effectiveness or power in the aspirin. Your liver is going to work harder to flush it out a little faster. Your body is only going to absorb so much of the aspirin at one time. So basically, you got to take aspirin and then you got to wait like the 2 hours or whatever it's recommended before you take some more. This guy, a healthcare worker, I really, now that I've even just done this little bit, what his job was as a healthcare worker, because I've read about like incredibly ignorant nurses and stuff in the past, and that always is a big surprise. Religious healthcare workers hit me hard pretty sometimes, because it's not like I expect healthcare workers to not believe in God, but I think they should put a certain amount of understanding or faith in science. That's a bit of a surprise. That's all we can say about that guy until we actually get more information. The convenience stores the government's putting a lot of pressure on them to not use as much plastic. So basically now if you go into a convenience store, you have to ask for a plastic bag. They won't give you one automatically. They still give you tons of stuff though. If you want a plastic spoon or a fork, you can get a plastic spoon or a fork. They give you these little wipes for your hands, which, seems like a good idea, but that's wrapped in plastic. And it's just, you get tons of garbage anytime you buy like food or stuff from a convenience store. Lawson, so there's some plans to try to reduce the amount of plastic they use. Lawson is trying to switch to wooden spoons. The wooden spoons are going to be 3 times more expensive than plastic spoons. So it doesn't seem like they're going to charge for it, but I'm not actually sure about that. 7-Eleven is going to offer 7-Eleven points for refusing plastic utensils, which might work out. The problem is 7-Eleven had a payment system that got hacked like last year or 2 years ago, and no one wants their points anymore. Family Mart is trying to use less plastic in their plastic spoons. So these are three companies with three sort of very distinct or divergent ideas on how to deal with the plastic problem. I'm more on board with the wooden spoons, and because wood, I bet they mean bamboo. I guess bamboo is not wood. They would have said specifically. Um, but there's a lot of bamboo products coming out to replace wood and replace plastic, and that's pretty interesting. That's one of the ones I'm sort of more interested in, because bamboo, it grows like a weed. Like, I've never heard it myself, but they say that if you go to a bamboo like field, grove, forest, I'm not 100% sure what bamboo is, so I'm not 100% sure what word I should use when describing a field of it, a herd of bamboo. And those three terms I just used, I'm not even sure what the definitions of those are. So I've spiraled down really quickly just now. They say if you go and it's quiet, you can actually hear it grow, which I'd be very interested in, because it seems like bamboo is actually the solution for a lot of plastic problems, these bamboo products. Tokyo Hotel made a Japanese only / foreigner only elevator, which caused a bit of controversy. They said it was for coronavirus measures, which all the racist things that have happened recently, because there was that thing that came out and it said, don't talk to or eat with foreigners to protect yourself from coronavirus. The underlying implication being it's foreigners that are giving all the Japanese people coronavirus, which isn't the case, because actually the border's been locked down. And we've seen in places where young Japanese people go out, the cases spike first. Tokyo. They, of course, then immediately got some pushback from it. Social media went a little bit crazy, and they said they had no intention to discriminate. They intended to separate the flow of guests, so the Japanese guests would go here, the foreign guests would go there, and there would be no discrimination. We're just trying to protect people and maintain, a certain amount of distance between groups and stuff, which doesn't actually make any sense. Because if you, let's say, have 10% of your hotel's foreign guests, because there's not supposed to be any people coming in to come to the Olympics, that would mean the amount of foreign guests would be minimal. So this would, in a weird way, the discrimination would be beneficial to the foreigners, because they would be getting on less busy elevators. Or if it's all Japanese guests, they'd all be getting packed onto these little elevators themselves. So you could say it was a negative idea with a positive impact, if you want to look at it that way. I don't think anyone looked at it that way, which is fair. You shouldn't. This is along the lines of that don't eat with foreigners thing. They're basically, there's an underlying implication that foreigners are carrying the virus. Foreigners are spreading it around. If you're a good, clean Japanese person, you're going to get it from the dirty, dirty foreigner. So is it discriminatory? And I think absolutely it is. If you were going to control the flow of people to an elevator, you would need to just designate, we will only limit capacity. We will have 10 people on the elevator at a time. If it's like an elevator that can hold 15 or 20. Limits would make sense. Separating people based on race doesn't. Because, again, like I said, or if you had all foreigners, I guess if the other underlying bias, the idea is that if it's spreading amongst foreigners, it's somehow okay if it's not catching Japanese people. But I'm interested, since this is all about the Olympics and there's not really supposed to be anyone coming in for the Olympics, where are these foreign people coming from that they're worried about? There have been 2 recorded cases of foreign athletes having coronavirus, but of course they were caught early and isolated very quickly. So actually the foreigners, I bet, are getting checked more carefully than the Japanese people, which could actually imply that if you really wanted to be careful about coronavirus, you should actually quarantine all the Japanese people, which is what I've been saying for the last 2 years or whatever. This was just They didn't have any pictures. I really wanted pictures. There's got to be security cameras in Starbucks, right? So this guy in Nagoya rolls into a Starbucks and he has a fire extinguisher and he threatens the staff. He tries to rob the Starbucks. It's like, give me the money. The staff, clearly not particularly threatened by his fire extinguisher, was staff in the back called the cops. The cops arrived to arrest the guy. That's the whole story. So many missing things that I need filled in because I wanted to know, did he brandish the fire extinguisher like a blunt weapon? So he held it over his head and like, if you don't give me all the money, I'm going to thump you with a fire extinguisher. Or did he hold the nozzle out and say, if you don't give me all the money, I'm going to spray you with the fire extinguisher? Tommy has just put in the chat, I hope they doused him with hot coffee. Ineffective, because if they go to douse him with hot coffee, he immediately could extinguish himself and the person. So I'm sorry, that's not how this works. But when he threatened the staff, did he brandish the end of it like he was going to shoot them with the fire extinguisher? Now, there's two types. Neither is going to hurt you, really. There's the spray, which is usually just kind of water. I don't even think fire extinguishers actually have those anymore. I know there's like foam, which I guess could make you sick. I don't think any sort of standard fire extinguisher that's just sitting around is going to actually have water in it, because again, that's only good on fire, because it could be a grease fire or something else. So as I'm thinking about this, I'm only thinking like, how did he threaten him? That's the bit I want to know. How did he threaten? Did he threaten to spray or hit? And they didn't say. And it's bad reporting. I kind of want to become a reporter so that I can give the details that I know that you want as well. There was a famous potter killed by his girlfriend, or his alleged girlfriend, in a love hotel. He was killed with a crossbow. Now, a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now, crossbows were basically made. You need a license to carry a crossbow, which was a weird loophole because guns are very controlled, knives are very controlled, swords are very controlled. There's lots of controlled things in Japan. Like air guns are controlled, but crossbows weren't. So now if you want a crossbow, you have to have a license. She shot him in the back. It says in the back of the head several times. And then she stabbed him in the back with a knife. And then she went to the front desk and reported the crime to the staff. So she just like, I killed my boyfriend upstairs. You can arrest me now. That's it. It was, that crime in itself was weird. But the part I kind of, again, that caught my interest that made me want to talk about it, I usually avoid death because it's hard to be amusing even when someone dies. And I feel bad already starting, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to soldier through. How big was the crossbow? And because love hotels, they're designed to be very quiet, private, intimate places. You go in and you don't talk to staff. No one sees you. So, but did she just carry a crossbow in? Because, okay, the problem is my image of a crossbow is a two-handed weapon. I know there's little ones. I know Assassin's Creed had one, like it was like on his forearm. And I'm pretty sure she didn't have one of those. But my image of a crossbow is a relatively large item. Not something you're going to be keeping in your purse. Not something you're going to hide easily. If I was with a girl, and I said, hey, girlfriend, let's go to a love hotel, and she had a crossbow with her, I might be like, hey, why do you have that crossbow? Even if you said like, this is for some kind of role play thing that I want to do, I wouldn't be into. I was like, no, I'm sorry. You're not bringing a crossbow with you. Something is wrong here. They don't explain how long this relationship is going on. Like, so there's no sense of how much they trusted each other. But if I've been married for like 15 years now, and if I was like, my wife and I are, let's say, going on a dinner date or something, and she like whipped out a crossbow and brought it and just sat in the car, I wouldn't start driving. I'd be like, hey, why do you have a crossbow? And if she said, "Oh, no reason," I'd be like, "Well, no. In the last like 15 years we've been together, you never had a crossbow before. That seems like an unusual item to suddenly have." The only explanation is that she had a crossbow on a regular basis, and this was not unusual, which is even weirder to me. So I feel like there should have been some suspicion, or this was some kind of incredibly weird small crossbow. And I feel bad making jokes about it because that is actually what I'm doing. But there had to be a moment where you saw a crossbow. And in my daily life, I'm 49 years old. I don't think I've ever seen a crossbow. I've seen them in movies, I've seen them on TV and stuff. I don't think I've ever seen just like a dude walking around with a crossbow. So the sight of a crossbow to me would almost be shocking. I think because I see cops with guns and stuff, and I see guns so much in media that maybe I could accept. I would see a gun and be like, "Ooh, self protection." Crossbow just no. It seems weird. It's also weird that this guy was famous. That they just added another layer of oddness to it. That he was a famous potter because you can actually, when they posted this news, you could actually see him and stuff, and he's an award-winning potter. He's won prizes for his pots and dishes and plates and stuff. Do that. There was one more story. I actually didn't want to talk about it, but then the prices got insane. There's a story about a Chinese guy, and he was I actually may not have written it down because I didn't want to do it. There was a Chinese guy in Tokyo, and he was selling Breath of the Wild save data for $30 online. He got arrested for a violation of the Unfair Competition Prevention Act, which seemed odd because it's a single player game, if I'm correct. And who is he hurting by selling modified save data? But apparently, it's just like an act that says like, I don't know. I guess he was breaking a law. I just don't understand how the law applies to this. He made over 10 million yen selling save data for the last couple of years. And the whole point was like, you tell him what you want. Like, I want my stats maxed out. He would sell you the save data with your stats maxed out. Probably because you had to alter something on the machine. I bet that's where the violation came in. Not the actual save data, but to get the save data onto the machine, you probably had to do some kind of change to the hardware of some sort. I bet that's where the violation comes in. But so I wasn't going to do that story because that's all I had to say about it. But then immediately, like the next day, The Legend of Zelda, an unopened disc at an auction in the United States, sold for $870,000. And this was, at the time, the most expensive video game sold. And then Super Mario had to come in and like, boop, boop, boop. I don't actually remember what sound he makes. I just remember he hits the coin. Super Mario had to come in and just steal that thunder. A copy sold for $1.56 million, which is a bit out of hand. I like video games. Not down with any of that.
You can tweet questions or comments at Ninja News Japan or join the Facebook group. On Facebook, search for Ninja News Japan. Sexy out, homie.
We can get some Dave content. Look at that monster. He's just taking the whole bed. I don't know if I can zoom up in that. Yep. And he's decided that bed is his and his alone. Dave is awesome.